Friends, today we want to bring to your attention as many as 3 stories that are somehow connected with truckers in their personal lives, in which there is enough of everything except peace of mind. So, the first story.
Adelaide, 27. My parents came to Paris from Algeria about 30 years ago. This is where I was born. However, my sister and I were brought up quite strictly in Muslim traditions, so that you understand I married a virgin at the age of 18 to a guy from the same Arab family that my father found. During all this time, I have never cheated on him, although there were offers and opportunities. I have always enjoyed male attention, as I have a spectacular oriental appearance, and despite having 2 children, I have kept a good figure, which I also support with constant training. I have a neat, toned ass and high breasts of a confident second size. One day, at the beginning of winter, I lost control and crashed into the trailer of a truck in front of me. Her driver, a sturdy, medium-sized guy in his early 30s, examined his and my injuries and with a laugh, in bad French, as it turned out he was from Ukraine, told me that because of such a trifle, nothing even needed to be made up. They'll laugh at the insurance company, because his paint wasn't even damaged, and I only had a small scratch on the bumper. Anyway, just in case, we exchanged phones and left. The scratch on my bumper was so small and superficial that my husband didn't even cover it up, and somehow I even forgot to tell him about it myself. 3 days later, I would have forgotten about this case, but then I received a message from this guy. His name, by the way, was Sergey, and in the message he wrote that his friend has his own garage where he paints cars. And then he suggested that I make a bumper there quickly and at a convenient time for me, and even completely free. He said it was inconvenient, as he said, that I, so small and fragile, would have to solve such issues myself. Actually, my husband always took care of all the cars all the time. I even went to the car wash myself only a couple of times in my life. However, at that time my husband had a lot of problems at work. He came in late and very tired, so not wanting to burden him even more, I agreed to Sergey's proposal, although I knew perfectly well that there was a lot of flirting in him. And besides, for some reason I've always been attracted to such, brutal-looking men, especially those who know how to fix something with their own hands. My husband is a programmer who can't even hammer a nail. In general, one beautiful early winter morning in Paris, when it was either sleet or freezing rain, I arrived at the specified address. Sergey has already met me, opened the garage door, got behind the wheel himself and drove the car inside. As it turned out, this garage was his. He rented it along with a small studio that was above the garage, and in which we went to drink coffee while the varnish with which he treated the bumper dried up. For a person who speaks French poorly, Sergey turned out to be an incredibly interesting conversationalist. He was very emotional and talked a lot about Ukraine, about his relatives who stayed there, but I was especially amused by his stories about his road adventures. It turned out that he has been working as a driver of heavy trucks for more than 10 years, and during this time he managed to travel all over Eurasia. Listening to Sergey's stories, I did not notice how 3 hours flew by. That's what it means to be able to interest a girl, I thought. I had certain suspicions that he would want something more than just to have coffee with me, but Sergey was a true gentleman, and after the coffee was drunk and the bumper was installed, he opened the garage and drove my car out. When I asked about the cost of his services, he just grinned and waved his hand. I thanked him and promised that the coffee would be with me next time, and went to work. However, Sergey could make an impression. For the rest of the day, I couldn't help but remember his sparkling eyes, hands, and his whole well-cut muscular figure, which was not spoiled even by a small tummy. Rather, on the contrary. And the next day I remembered him. In the evening, taking a shower, I, unbeknownst to myself, began to caress myself and got so carried away that I reached orgasm. And at that moment I was not imagining my husband at all. Anyway, a day later I just called him and thanked him for his work, saying that the bumper looks better than when it was new. As it turned out, Sergey was already on a flight somewhere on the border with Germany at that time, and was supposed to return no earlier than a week later. When we said goodbye, I felt relieved along with a slight disappointment. In the week that he will be gone, I thought then, I will forget him, and the thoughts that are wrongly spinning in the head of a married Muslim woman will cease to bother me. But not fate. The next day, when I was at work, he called me and offered to have lunch together. As it turned out, his truck will be standing somewhere for another week and waiting for something. In general, I was much more excited that he was back in Paris. The closer it got to lunch, the more worried I became. And suddenly someone sees us, and suddenly he wants more than just lunch. All this is spinning in his head again. Somewhere around 12 o'clock, he wrote me a message that he was waiting for me in the garage, where he would look at the bumper and at the same time treat me to his own cooked dishes from Ukrainian cuisine. If he had called instead of texting, I probably would have refused. Oh, so I, as if enchanted, took time off from work and went to him. The dinner was a great success. Talented people are talented in everything. I felt this talent especially when he kissed me. A wave of panic hit me then. Her husband's face flashed before her eyes. I tried to pull away from his embrace, but his lips, combined with his hands, worked wonders. The moment he entered me, I didn't think about anything distracting from the process anymore. When I arrived home in the evening, even at the entrance, I began to put out the sparkle in my eyes and erase my smile. However, it wasn't that easy. I was just flying, and I have never experienced such a wave of love and tenderness for my husband. It was a strange cocktail of guilt, shame, and tenderness. I put the kids to bed early, cooked dinner, and wearing the sexiest of my underwear, gave my husband a night of love. Of course, he was surprised by such surprises, because sex has not been a frequent occurrence with us lately, but I explained this to him by saying that I wanted to distract him from his problems at work. And he got distracted. Now I'm writing all this, and I'm thinking, what should I do next?
Dear subscribers, if you are interested in the story of Adelaide, then we have ITS continuation. Write and we will publish it.
Isabella, 19. I cheated on my boyfriend with a trucker. While in university, I was in a long-distance relationship with my boyfriend. The only times we would meet up were around holidays when we were both home. Our parents lived 5 minutes from each other. Well, my boyfriend was never great at flirting, so anytime we would text, I never felt wanted. I spent some time on Discord and ended up flirting back and forth with a random guy from one of the large servers I was in. He would talk about how much my body turned him on and described how he'd use me. And I loved every second of it. He knew what state I lived in and mentioned he was a trucker and would be in the area in April, right when my spring break started, so I agreed to meet him. I told my parents I was spending the night at a friend's house and drove 1.5 hours to meet this random 30-something guy I've only talked to online. I met him at the motel, he said, and he looked at how I was dressed, skirt and thigh highs, things I know he likes, and laughed a bit, telling me I looked like a slut, which only made me more excited. We spent the night in the motel. I gave him a strip tease and went down on him. My oral skills aren't great, but all of the sudden he pushed on the back of my head and came in my mouth. I was doing my best not to gag, and I was forced to swallow everything since it went straight down my throat. Then we cuddled while he recovered and he started fingering me, and God, can this guy use his fingers? He'd alternate his fingers, so he was constantly pressing against my G-spot, and after just a few minutes I was dripping wet and he had 3 thick fingers inside of me making me come. He had me climb on top of him and ride him, grabbing my hips to help me move with one hand, and using the other to grope my breasts, all while shaming me for being enough of a whore to drive out here just for sex. He came inside of me because he knew I was on the pill, and we went to bed. Later at around 3 or 4 a.m. I was slightly woken up. I felt him pull my hips to the edge of the bed, and he fucked me while I was half asleep until he finished again, then let me go back to bed. We went another round in the morning, and then he took me out to breakfast where I was unable to sit still from the sex, which made him laugh. We said our goodbyes and I went back home. A few days later, I had a date with my boyfriend and I told him nothing about the trucker.
Behavior. 34. Asian professor here, and I love to cheat and get action when I am on work trips. I know a lot of truckers who love my body and I sleep with them. Well, I want to confess my sins. Haha, I'm 34 from Northeast India, Nagaland. I work as a lab manager cosmetic professor, so I have to move around a lot in my country, which I do often. For the last few years I've been having guys in me often from various sections of the society. Blue collar, white collar, both. Recently I started using Tinder and keep it low-key by hiding my contacts. I'm a pretty important church member in my hometown and quite a known person there, but when I'm in other states or cities I'm just a very dirty slut who likes being used and cummed upon. I roam around commando and sometimes wear tight tank tops and shorts which I don't back home. I've recently worn bikinis in a beach which I wouldn't have with my husband. I have blown men more than I've blown my husband in this year with my pouty full lips. Usually I drive my own car so it is easy to stop and do it, have sex if possible at night by the highway or small villages. It is risky, but being railed by farmers, truckers and low manual labourers makes me crave them more. I have a lot of trucking friends who do long distance hauls and I have slept with them, made out and had drinks, all because of how degrading it is for me and how they hold power over me. I'm pale, Naga ethnicity, slit cat eyes and thin eyebrows. 5FT1, 32D hairless and Abbott thick around thighs and arms. I get wax and laser hair removal for my body just because the men I be with appreciate and love how smooth and pale I am compared to the women they be with.
Thank you if you listened to the end. Subscribe, like and comment. Bye.